Okay, so picking up right where we left off in the first two videos, we created the beginnings of an HR database. In that database, you can create records for new hires, and that based upon the job description, the role that is assigned to them, training is then assigned to them as well. So a record is created in a separate table saying what training they have and when it's due. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're now going to start reporting on that information. We're going to create a query that searches for training that has certain criteria like, is it due in 7 days? Is it past due? These are the kind of things that you usually report on because you'll give the employer an advisory or a warning saying, this is due in 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, or it's past due, you now have a problem. So you're going to want to be able to create a range of criteria in which you're reporting on as far as the date. The other criteria we're going to add is whether or not you should even be reporting on training, because if the training has been completed, that's it. It should be excluded from reporting at that point, at least for what's due or past due. You might have a report that tracks completed training as well, but again, once you get the basics of reporting, querying based on date and that kind of thing, you can just start plugging in whatever criteria you want. So, in order to do this, we're going to have to make a modification to the EE training table. Specifically, we're going to add another flag, and it's going to be very similar to what we did in the last video. In the last video, we created a flag that has a default value, and that it indicates whether or not that record should be updated. So similarly, we're going to add another flag that's going to indicate whether or not the training is completed and to exclude it from reporting, again, depending on what you're reporting on. If it says the training is completed, then you would only include it in queries that are looking for completed training. If you're looking for training that's not yet completed or coming due, then clearly those records would be excluded. So let's go ahead and add that flag. So since the table is not open, I'm just going to right click and choose Design View. It's the same thing as if the table is open. You go to Home and Design View. We're going to add that new field. So we're going to use completed yet, and it's going to be short text. Again, since it's yes or no, you could use the yes or no data type. I personally don't like using yes or no data type. I won't get into the reasons now, but as you've seen, it's easy enough just to use a short text. It's easy to change it to Y or N, yes or no, that kind of thing. And as I mentioned, it needs a default value just like the updated record flag. So completed yet is selected, default value. So it's going to default to no because it is not completed, because this is going to be, since you're creating a new record, clearly the training hasn't been done yet. So default value will be no. And that's it for this table at the moment. So we're going to close that. It's going to ask to be saved because we just made some changes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create the query. So create, query design. You can either select the tables from here or just drag them from the side here. It doesn't matter. So we'll just double click, expand this out a little bit. I'm just going to click on the top one, hold shift, click on the bottom one. Yes, there's other ways that you can select everything. I just like the shift click because that's common across a lot of applications. Then you can just left click and drag everything down here. So we said that for this first query, we're looking at stuff that's due. So for completed yet, we want this to be no, it is not completed yet. We said that is the default value. So we want to see what isn't completed yet. Now, because we have blank values, because we only just added that field now, we're going to have an issue if we don't populate that field retroactively, which is what I mentioned in the last video as well. So let's go to EE training again. You can see now that this is indeed populating as no. So what we're going to do is we're just going to manually put in no for this, no for this, no for this, and we'll create a new record just to prove that this is working. You can see it's pre-populated, but again, it doesn't hurt to prove it out. So we'll close that. And again, it did not ask me to save because you're not prompted to save data. The data is saved as soon as you enter it into the field and you navigate to the next field. It only asks you to save if you're changing the structure. So with this still open, I'm going to go and create a new record. Don't worry, doesn't hurt anything. So onboarding, this one will be Chris. And the start date will be, let's see, 11/01/2019. So the training should be due on 11/15. So add record, yes, yes, and yes, and yes. So now let's make sure everything worked. So EE table, there's Chris, there's the hire date. EE training, there's Chris at the top. And again, these got populated. This starts off as yes until the due date gets populated and then gets set to no. So that's exactly what you'd expect. That it only stays as yes for the briefest of moments. And then completed, no. So working as intended. So let's go ahead and close that. Go to close that. And now we're not going to base this on a date yet. We're just going to run this. So save, and we'll call this do training. And then you can just run it. So again, it's looking at the criteria of anything that's set to no, and that's the only criteria that it's looking at. So it's not looking at the date yet. So two things. A, we will need to set up a way for this to be set to yes, it's been completed. That one is a little bit tougher. I mean, it's easy to do, but it's tougher because typically this type of thing you'd expect to be integrated with a greater human resource system. So someone completes a module, a message gets sent to the database, updates the database. Well, clearly we don't actually have these training modules, and it'd be an awful lot of work just to put something like that into place. So just keep in mind that this is going to probably be updated automatically, that this will be integrated with a larger training system. So that's how that will get updated, but we can manually change this just to make sure it's working. And then what we need to do is we now want to look at the due date. So let's go ahead and close that. And we will go to Design View. And what we need to do is we need to put in a date. But here's the thing. We said that there's a couple different dates we might want to look at. We might want to look at 7 days out. We might want to look at 1 day out. We may want to look at past due, and past due would be 1 day past due. And at that point, you might, depending on the organization, the action may be very severe, like they're immediately suspended, that kind of thing. So I only say it that way because you probably don't want something that says it's 10 or 15 or 20 days past due. If you've got something that past due, you need to ask yourself, is this something they really need to do? A, do they really need to do it? And B, why would we let it go that far? We should have taken action already. So that's the only reason why I'm saying that after 1 day, you might want to bring the hammer down because, again, is the training really necessary? And if it is necessary, then you shouldn't be 15 days past due. So there's a couple ways that you can do this. What you can do is you can have the query be prompted for a value, but then you're manually putting in a value. Or what you can do is, just as we created a form to create records, you can create a form that gives you an interface with this query, because just as we really hid away the assign query, this is in the background because the user doesn't even see the query. This gets attached to the button, basically, that when you click the button, it goes out and executes this query. So same kind of thing. You can hide the query away by using a form. So what you can do is we will, again, leave this open, but we'll create a form. Actually, Yeah, we'll leave this open because we named it. That's all that really matters. So we're going to go to blank form, view, design view. Again, we're going to get rid of the record selectors because we don't want people navigating in a way that's not intended. So design, make sure the form itself is selected. That little black dot indicates that. And that for format, we're going to shut off record select and navigation buttons. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create a drop-down. When we create the drop-down, when you select it, we're going to have a procedure run that then goes out to this query and gives you a result. So we're going to use a combo box, and we'll do open. And what we're going to do here, just so you can see a range of ways to use this, in this case, I'm going to manually type the values into the drop-down box because up to this point, we've had the drop-down box look at other values in tables. So it links out to the values in a table. In this case, I'm going to manually put it in because it's a very small amount. We're going to do like 7 days, 1 day, that kind of thing. So I want to type the values that I want. So next, we'll expand that out, but really don't need to because it's only going to be a couple of digits. So 14, 7, let's try that again, 7, and do in 1 day. So next, and then finish. So let's save this, and we'll call this do underscore form. And then we go to view. And there you go, 1471. This indicates that these numbers can be modified, so you'd want to shut that off. We can do that in a minute. Actually, let's do that right now. So again, make sure you know what you have selected. In this case, we have the combo box selected rather than the form. And then for data, we don't want to allow list edits. So right there, allow value list edits on the data tab. Change that to no. Save it one more time. Just so you know, I'm not making this up as I go along. Okay. Actually, I fibbed. I am making this up as I go along, but I do know what I'm doing most of the time. Anyways, so what we're going to do now is we have these values in the drop-down box. We want to take that value and put it into the query. So the way we do that is we want this to have an event. And again, it needs to be the drop-down box. So on change, so you've made a selection, we want something to happen. We're going to run that query. So code builder. And what's nice, if you don't remember how you did something previously, it's opening up the other procedures. So do cmd dot open query, and the name is, I believe it's do, sorry, is that a quote? Yep. My eyesight fails me. Do underscore training. That's it. So we save that. And we'll go back to that. So we're now saying that when we make a change, it should run that query. But all the query is looking for now is the no field, the completed set to no. So what we want to do is we want to modify that. So we still have do training open. And what we're going to do is the criteria is going to be dynamic. The criteria is going to be based on the selection from that form. So for criteria, we're going to go to due date. And what we want is when this due date is the amount of days selected away from today's date. So date. So actually, let's bring up the expression builder. Got a little bit of typing to do. So it's going to be equal to date, but today's date with that amount of days added to that. So we're going to navigate here. So HR database, forms, loaded forms, due form, and we want the value from the combo box. So it's saying the criteria. Let's click OK. So we want all records where the due date is equal to today's date plus the selected amount of dates away. Now, the only problem with this is we're going to have to make sure we have dates that fall into that, because we're looking for an exact amount. Because again, we're not looking for a range. We're looking for it's exactly 7 days away, or exactly 1 day away, or exactly 14 days away. So since today is the 23rd, so 14, let's do 7 because that's the 30th. So what we're going to do is we're just going to manually make a change in here just for the purposes of demonstrating. We're going to go to EE training, and we're going to say that the due date is going to be, doesn't matter which one we choose, it's due 7/30. Close that. Save this. So if we choose 7 days, that's the one record that should come up. So close, close, and now we go to due form, 7, and there you go. Leon, it's 7 days away, not completed. Okay, that was actually all I really had intended for this lesson, is the ability to report on this. I suppose I can go a little bit further. I would have to just tweak the data so as that there are dates within that range. So if for 14 days, it would be another 7 days later. So let's do the 1 day. Even I can do a 1 day calculation. So let's close that. And we go back to our EE training. We'll use a different day so it doesn't keep bringing up the same record. So for 1 day, so 7/24. Close that. We choose 1 day. And there you go, brings up 7/24. So let's do one more. So we go to, again, EE training, and we'll make that nope. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, so just like that, you can select whether it's due on 1, 7, or 14 days. You can then also do if it's past due. And let's go ahead and add the past due version, and then I think that should do it for this video. So we just go back to due form, design view, and then if you notice, data tab, row source, so here's where the data is. Okay, we entered 14/7/1, it's semicolon separated, so we'll just add a -1. And again, you probably don't want to have a -7 or a -10. Why would you let vital training be that far past due? So that's more of an operational decision, though, not a design decision. So we've added the -1, so let's go ahead and save that. the calculation will already work because rather than adding a positive, it's adding a negative, which is subtraction. So since today's the 23rd, we need a due date of the 22nd. So let's go into EE training and we'll just modify another one of these. Actually, let's use this one up here. So this one will be 07/22, so it's due yesterday. Nothing else needs to be changed. Everything else is the way it should be because training has not been completed, and this has been set to no, which is correct. So we close that. We run -1 and did not bring up the right one. Let's just close everything. Due form, -1. There we go. So I think it was just a glitch where the report didn't where the query didn't update. Access has been like this for as long as I can remember. I was originally trained on 2010. This should be, even though at the top it says 2016, it was the newest version. I think they stopped numbering at this point, so it should be like whatever, 2019. So anyways, it did work, so my apologies for the confusion. Like I said, I just don't think the query refreshed properly because there's that refresh issue. That's one of the reasons why you keep seeing me close things, is because I don't want to ever get confused, and I did not close it like I should have. So good teachable moment that that you really do want to close out things that you're not using, because you don't want to ever make that mistake and think, gee, it didn't work, when in fact it did work. It just didn't refresh properly. That's particularly common, like if you have a table open and you write to the table, you go back to the table without closing it, you won't see the new record. And then you start wondering, why didn't it save the record? It did. So I'm going to leave that little mistake in there because it's a good teachable moment. Close the stuff that you're not using because, as you can see, it did not refresh properly because I didn't make any change, and yet when I ran it the second time, it worked. Okay, so that should about do it. If you like this video, just let me know, and if you want to see anything else added to this. But I think that this particular part has run its course because now you've seen how to create a new record as far as an employee, associate training with it, and have a date associated with that training, and then report on that date. About the only thing that we don't have, like I said, is the actual setting to completion, but that's really beyond the scope of this because that type of thing tends to be automated. Again, there would be some kind of training module. When the module is completed, it sends a message to this database. It interacts with this database and says it's been completed. But we know that it's working, though. If you want, we could change that value, but it didn't bring up any of the ones that were blank, but we'll change that value just so you can see it. So we will go back to EE training. That's the one for the -1. We'll change it to completed yes. We'll change the -1, and now it no longer brings up no records. Okay, so again, if you found this useful, just let me know. If there's anything else you want to see, just let me know, and have a good night.